what can this program do for fibromyalgia, chronic pain, and complex migraines, which cause seizure-like symptoms on a daily basis almost?
Well, we have to look at each of these individually, because what we've learned over the decades here at Hippocrates is that often things are connected, but sometimes one epicenter problem, as an example, it may be neurological in this particular case, actually creates a symptomology that we may call, with migraines, neurological, fibromyalgia. We've also discovered that with each of these, there are major contributory reasons that they may occur. Let's go first to migraines that may go to seizures. First, we have to rule things out. And as unpleasant as it is to speak about this, has there been MRIs done? Has there been scans of the brain? And if so, was there any sign of disorder or tumor or growth there? Because we go to the most dramatic potential or possibility first. If we rule that out, then we go down to the neurological, possibly being in the lower body, not the brain, from the brain stem down. Now that can be caused from lots of different poisonings, heavy metal poisonings, chemical poisonings, or long-term use of what we call food in our very sick world. For instance, I've seen this type of symptomology 150 times in people that consume large amounts of coffee. And coffee has a bad rap for good reason, for the caffeine, but worse than the caffeine is the acidity levels, even in the so-called organic decaffeinated coffee. That enough consumption, and in particular bodies, not everyone's body, it would actually take the sheathing off the neurological system and not allow the neurons to perform the way they should. Now let's give all the listeners a picture. Neurons sort of go down a very narrow tube, and that tube is very coordinated and very much like a chain. What would happen if, for instance, at the end of that tube, or somewhere in the middle of the tube that appeared to be the end, there was a blockage? Now, the neurons that are carrying electron activity up from the brain and to the brain, and down from the brain to the lower parts of the body, is blocked. Then these little pieces of electric that are carried in the neurons, the brain generated cells and the nervous system cells, are going to start to build up to a point where it would be like getting an electrocution in the brain, and a seizure or seizure-like symptoms can happen. Now that blockage can go to the next thing we want to talk about, some type of a skeletal or structural injury. And we're seeing more and more from our chiropractic and osteopathic community because now they have motion films of skeletal structure. So before we do snapshots and sort of guess or speculate, today they can actually film somebody's head in motion. You can see the spine, you can see the skull, and we're seeing an awful lot of people that have practically close to severed brain stems from the rest of their neurological system. It's almost as if their head is a ball being propped up on a stick, and the only thing that's keeping it on the top of the head is balance. And we're seeing a lot more of these injuries today. Now, I think that's because of the osteoporotic conditions, or the degeneration of bone structure due to the lack of resistant exercise and poor nutrition. Again, high acidity contributes to the degeneration of hard tissue as well as neurons, as we spoke about. So now we'll move on. The gastrointestinal tract is often a contributor to migraines, but I have never really seen it solo or alone contribute to seizure-like symptomology. Now we go to fibromyalgia. Flip the page, but remember everything we've just said. Fibromyalgia is clearly to us a microbial problem that can be combined with everything we just talked about, or at least part of what we just talked about. The microbe, we are sure, is a viral and probably part of the same family that chronic fatigue, or some of you know it as Epstein-Barr. It's a retrovirus, a microscopic virus that was born, we believe, out of large rhinoviruses that came together and spawned this new generation of viruses. The AIDS, or HIV, is part of it. It's a distant cousin. Again, UCLA shows us that they've already identified 5 or more of the chronic fatigue viruses. When I was a boy, the one we knew about but didn't know it was a chronic fatigue virus or retrovirus was mononucleosis, the kissing disease. And I'll never forget, I felt so bad when I got that. My parents knew I kissed girls at that point. So bottom line is that we know that that is part of it. And again, what does a virus do when it comes to nerves? Well, a virus also has a frequency. Every disorder, be it cancer, be it a virus, a spirocate, which is Lyme's disease, or a bacteria, has frequencies. And when we look at them with microscopes, it's really interesting. You see the frequencies. And after you do a lot of microscopic work, like my wife, Anna Maria, you can actually almost identify what bacteria or virus or microbe it potentially can be. Spirocate, for instance, vibrates at a totally different level, looks different, of course, but vibrates at a different level than a virus. A rhinovirus, meaning nose viruses or colds, flus, this type of thing, are sort of like big elephants trying to do the twist. And so they look really slow, but they do move. Where now what we're talking about, retroviruses, are extremely high frequencies. So now we go to the nervous system, which is quite a bit generated with neuron activity, which is high electric to begin with. And it would be like taking a drill and using it where it's really, really hot at the top. That's the virus. And it would come over and it would touch the nervous system. And that's why those with so-called fibromyalgia, it wanes and comes back. Some days it's really bad, some days it's not. In the morning it may be worse than it is at night. After you're exhausted, it may be bad. Because, again, further degeneration occurs normally even with healthy people of tissue mass just from daily activity. And then if we exhaust it by putting a retrovirus in there and also have already a disrupted nervous system due to the things we mentioned just on the last page, all of that together can be contributory to these type of symptoms. Now, to get down to the bottom, the question, how does Hippocrates deal with that? Now, over the last 52 years, we are very clear on what our mission statement is here, helping people help themselves. And we are not the way that most healthcare looks at things. You come to me, you give me money, I know you'll never know, and you need to keep coming to me and give me money. Our objective is to get you to the point, the participants here, so that you do not need Hippocrates or hopefully any other healthcare professional in the future. I don't think it was in the intent of nature or God, if you will, to make it so that we were dependent upon other human beings. We are free-willed individuals with self-responsibility if we are willing to be that. And if you come here, we are going to teach you from the very basic primary ways that you need to understand the body and how it functions to how to function in this world, this insane world, in a sane way, by eating correctly, exercising, and yes, there are certain therapies we'd employ on this.